Okay, moving along, superintendent's recommendations and reports.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Begley. At this time, I would like to ask Mrs. Hauer to cover the items listed under Personnel Professional and Personnel Support.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Begley and members of the board, I have several items for your consideration this evening. Under Personnel Professional, number 1, extracurricular resignation, letter A. Number 2, an unpaid leave of absence, letter A. And number 3, employment, letters A and B. And that concludes all the items I have for your consideration this evening under Personnel Professional.
Thank you, Mrs. Hauer. I'll entertain a motion to accept these recommendations.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Clark and Mrs. Shorter. Mrs. Lane, call the roll, please.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Shorter?
Yes.
Mrs. Gundram?
Yes.
Mr. Begley?
Yes.
I also have several items for your consideration this evening under Personnel Support. Number 1, resignations, letters A through C. Number 2, unpaid leaves of absence, letters A through C. Number 3, employment, letters A through D. And number 4, termination, letter A. That concludes all the items I have for your consideration this evening under Personnel Support.
Thank you again, Mrs. Hauer. I'll entertain a motion to accept these recommendations.
So moved. Second.
Mrs. Shorter and Mrs. Gundram, any discussion? I would just like to say there were a number of changes here in employment, and bus drivers is always a consideration. How are we doing with bus drivers these days?
Mr. Bagley, we're doing well, not great, but we are doing well. Actually, soon we're going to be coming back to the board for requesting approval for a retiree hiree for the second time. Oh, sorry. But as I said before, we're doing well. That we do have a retiree hiree recommendation that's coming. In addition to that, we're working with the HR department on trying to get out more different platforms for recruiting, different areas, trying to find different ways just to get the word out that we do have jobs and we are willing to train. We are one of the only districts that actually does pay to train drivers to become CDL and help them get certified, which has been a great benefit for us the past couple of years. So again, I appreciate you asking, but we are doing well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Lane, please call the roll.
Mrs. Shorter?
Yes.
Mrs. Gundram?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Begley?
Yes.